Hey, writers and news daters, here I am at the studios of KYGT. We're about to go live on the radio where I'm going to talk about how to write, publish, and sell your book. Here's the host, Jerry, ready to ask some great questions and chat with you today. So here we are. Andrew's going to be leading a live discussion, so feel free to ask your questions, and I'll be looking forward to seeing those. Here we are live on KYGT.
All right, hey everyone, this is Jerry Fibyanic on KYGT. Hey everyone, this is Jerry Fibyanic on KYGT, LPFM 102.7, 103.9, and we are with you live here from the very, let me do this here so, so our listening audience out on the radio land can hear us too. So, so coming at you live here from the center of the universe, and in the studio with me, Annalisa, how does it feel to be in the very center of the universe?
I am so excited to be in the center of the universe. It's journey to the center of the earth here.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and what a fantastic day, huh?
Wonderful, it's a beautiful day here in Colorado.
Yeah, so looking forward to a great discussion with you here, and it's Annalisa Parent. This is the Rabbit Hole and a Writer's Talk on the Rabbit Hole. Annalisa was with me about a year ago. Well, not physically with me. I think you were windsurfing on Lake Champlain.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And, so it got a little tricky sometime on our reception.
It did.
Oh, but it's great to have you come back again. So, this is Writer's Talk on the Rabbit Hole. And I want to thank all our sponsors. Without sponsors, community radio like this is not possible. And I am sponsoring this hour.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jerry, for your sponsorship.
Absolutely. And you can learn more about my work, Sisyphus Wins, by going to jerryfabianic.com. And learn more about there and my next work. And, hopefully it's still in the draft stage, but it's getting there. You know the drill on that, don't you?
Absolutely. And if I can put in a plug for Jerry's work, if you haven't read Sisyphus Wins yet, you absolutely must get a copy of this book. It's fabulously written.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, stretcher. And, so we're talking because you're a writer's coach, writing coach, and editor and everything yourself. So you have some real insight into the back end of the process as opposed to the writing end. You do it all.
I do, yes. We help writers to write, publish, and sell their books.
Excellent. Okay, so that is Annalisa Parent, and she helps writers, we say, to find the confidence and expertise to bring their novels from ideas to publishable. Her work, Storytelling for Pantsers. I love that title. Yeah, being a pantser, we'll talk about what that means. Helps non-outliners to work through the writing and revision process with ease. Annalisa is the senior editor of Laurel Elite Books and not seasonal. No, you do it all year, right?
All year round.
Yeah, so you're seasoned, like in salt and pepper and those other, some of those
Garlic,
Italian garlic, thyme, basil, So a seasoned writer and coach, I should say, and she is the 2015 Teacher of the Year nominee for her use of neuroscientific principles. That's pretty amazing. She applies these same principles to her work with writers to create confidence and success. She writes for many local, national, and international publications, has written and produced sketches for a Tally Award-winning television show, and a firm believer in the Oxford comma. Oh, we'll have to talk about the Oxford comma because I'm with you on it, but we'll defer to the AP style, MLA guidelines when necessary. So welcome once again, Annalisa. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jerry. It's a pleasure to be here with you in studio this time.
Yeah, because the last time you were floating, like I say, I mean, you were back home, at home at that time, right?
Yes,
okay.
Home at that time.
Yeah, and so you got to, we got to telecommute, we'll put it that way. Yeah.
Something like that.
But that's good stuff. So, you're an expert on writing. Let's do a quick synopsis about your work itself, because as a writer, I've gotten to learn the difference between a pantser and a planner and so forth. Let's do a quick overview. Your book tells about it, and then let's go, really start digging deep into this.
Let's do it. So a pantser is someone who flies by the seat of his or her pants. There's someone who doesn't plan or outline before they write. And many of these writers have been told that that's the wrong way to do it, that they're doing something wrong by people who firmly believe in an outline. And I believe that 99.9% of writers are actually pantsers of a varying type. Some of them are a little bit more structured, but others kind of go all over the place. There's a spectrum there. And that's just what I've observed in talking to thousands and thousands of writers about their writing process. And the thing that happens, especially for those end of the spectrum super pantsers, I'll call them, is they end up with a big mess, a muddle that they have no idea how to navigate through and turn into an actual story. And so I've come up with a method of helping them to find the story in what I call the murky, murky mess, so that they can actually finish a novel, because we can't revise a novel until we've written a novel, and we can't edit and we can't publish a novel until it's actually written. So we need to get that story out on paper. Now, structure is certainly important to story, and there are points at which we're going to implement structure, but everything to its time and its purpose. And that's not just me making things up. That's neuroscience that has shown us a very distinct difference between the creative process and the critical process.
I want to get into that because when I read your work, this was last fall, I got into
October 1st is my anniversary for Storytelling for Pantsers. It's coming up.
And I was really, impressed in a couple ways. One was that the ease of going through, you make it lighthearted in a way to move through. You're having this moment, a little cartoonish, yet it's chock full of neuroscience background evidence that shows or that demonstrates that how our brains function differently and how then that gets translated out into the writing process.
That's a really astute observation, Jerry, because actually there's a little bit meta going on there, right? I chose the tone of this book to be lighthearted and fun very deliberately for a neuroscientific purpose, which, it should be an enjoyable experience to read this book. And if you enjoy it, you will continue to read and you will continue to learn and become a better writer. So even the writing style that I chose, rather than being very strictly academic, was a choice so that readers could easily access that information and implement that information.
So in your writing, are you a pantser or a planner?
So in nonfiction, so when I wrote Storytelling for Pantsers, there was a lot of planning happening. And that comes from, a 20-plus year veteran journalistic background of having my bullet points along the way of where I want to go. When I write fiction, as much as I would love for my brain to follow a specific structure, that's not my creative process.
Right.
And one of my phrases that I say a lot is find the writer you are and be that writer. So it's really important to accept your creative process. So for me, it's never going to happen that I'm going to write chapter 1 and then chapter 2 and then chapter 3. That's just not how my creativity works. So I'm all over the place and I have to work through that murky, murky mess as well.
And I would imagine that a clear delineation, not an absolute, but a delineation between fiction and nonfiction. That nonfiction might be perhaps more structured, planned out, where you want to be at the end and so forth. Fiction could be a mix of it. I think of a murder mystery, for example, when you already figured out, who did it, the butler, that sort of thing there. And then it's just like, okay, how do I paint that picture in between so you can lay it out? I find that when I'm writing, a character will just appear in my mind and the fingertips start going, and the next thing you know, I am off on this tangent with this character somewhere. Mm-hmm. So, and I just, in that case, I'm very open to writing fiction. Is that the usual process or a common one, I should say?
I would say that's absolutely a common process. And the thing about nonfiction, if we're creating a classic argument or anything that would fit under the umbrella of classic argument, then we have supporting evidence. And that's where creating an outline is not only necessary but helpful, because we know what our supporting evidence is. Now, when we're creating a character, eventually we will know what our quote-unquote supporting evidence is, as far as what are the attributes of that character that move the plot forward. But when we get to know that character, it's like getting to know somebody that we meet at a picnic or a bar or whatever. We're going to get to know that person slowly. We're not going to know the things that we like about them until we've spent a lot of time with them. And the same thing happens with our characters, with our plots, and with our scenarios in general.
Now, when you say when we get to know the character, is it from the writer, the author's end, or from the reader also, or is it both?
That's really interesting. So in the creative process and the drafting process, I really like to focus on the writer and the writer's experience of getting to know the characters. We absolutely want to keep the reader in mind in the revision process. And we might have the reader in mind as we work through the writing process, but I can promise you that if you're having fun as the writer, your reader is going to have fun when they read it. And that it doesn't have to mean something funny to have fun, right? I mean, you could write a really gory murder scene in your murder mystery, and for whatever reason, I bet Stephen King has a whole lot of fun when he puts those together, right? He's in his creative flow.
Right, and then they get into the head of the characters also, and develop him, her, whatever. And I'm going to go back to my line here. What did you call it? Well, like a pantser, the extreme. It's like a muddled mess at the end. What did you call it?
The murky, murky mess.
Murky, murky mess. Mine is muddled. Okay, murky, murky mess. I'm that way. And, so I get this great big long manuscript done. I got it there. And I look at that and I go, wow, how many points of view do I have in here? Is this really omniscient? Talk about that. First of all, let's explain, for the general audience, something we probably learned as juniors in high school but forget, about limited versus omniscient and somewhere in between. And then how we could bring structure, because ultimately, even if you have this very creative process, you still have to bring structure to the novel, to the stories.
Absolutely.
Here's the beginning, and here's the end, and here's the conclusion, where's the climax, all that other stuff. So I probably just threw a lot at you on that. My mind is jumping all over as a pantser.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think that you hit the nail on the head there, Jerry, because being a pantser, let's use an analogy. There's a whole section in my book on analogies, because I think they're really apt illustrations for us to understand a process that's incomprehensible because it lacks structure. We can't define it. So boards, some flat boards, some long boards, some roofing tile, all of those things are elements of the house. None of those are a house. And we might have sort of like the door standing up clearly on the doorstep. That's not a house. It's a big fat mess that can become a house. But the thing is, if she's overshopped, which most pantsers have overwritten, she's going to have to decide what goes in the house and what things need to go back to the store and don't belong in that story, or maybe they're going to go in the next house, and so we put them in storage and we hang on to them for later. But that overwriting problem, I would say, is a huge problem, because what do we have to do? Thank you, Stephen King. We have to kill our darlings. And that's the hard part, right? Because I really like that character. I really like that scene. I want to find a way to put that in the book, but it's not serving the plot. We've got to go put it in the garage, and maybe we get to take that out in the future for another story. But if it's not serving the story, it's got to go. Okay,
excellent. Yeah, that helps me. Reflecting on like my manuscript, because you're right. We tend to create, and then we're out there, and then go back through and say, is this character or this aspect of the character really necessary for the storyline itself? Because I find myself going through works of fiction and reading, and I see how the author's gone off on something and say, well, that's kind of nice to know, but quite frankly, I'm not really interested. I don't know what happens here. So next thing you know, man, I'm flipping pages, it's like, okay, I want to get, to the good part to get back to the storyline. You want to get in there and get it done. Because we're in a different age than we were, 80, 100 years ago when Tom Wolfe was writing his tomes and whatnot here. And so we tend to have to be more compact, I would think, in our writing.
You absolutely do. And even chapter lengths are getting shorter and shorter in traditionally published fiction to accommodate some of that attention span. That isn't to say that there isn't space for books like Game of Thrones. I mean, don't throw that at your friends, they'll die. These are huge books. But we do need to have the reader in mind at all times as we're creating that final product.
Okay. I want to come back to point of view. And, is it a key in a story that it is told from beginning to end, front to end, whatever, from either a limited point of view or omniscient or what's the other about, it's not quite limited point of view and it's not quite omniscient. I think there's another that you can have.
The middle one.
The middle one that you can have a couple characters' perspectives on it without it getting muddled. If you get a manuscript and you say, okay, you're all over the place here, do you nail it down and say, look, it has to be either or, can you do something in between?
There are a lot of caveats there. So if you're a first-time author looking to traditionally publish, the most important thing about your point of view is that it's consistent throughout and that it's consistent with the conventions of your genre. Now, that said, I just finished a great book discussion about the Pulitzer Prize winning novel Less, which changes point of view in the middle of a chapter. So why did he get away with that? Well, it's his fifth novel. It's a work of genius, and it won the Pulitzer. So,
And it didn't stop him winning the Pulitzer.
That's right.
Okay.
And he did take a risk in writing that, and the author acknowledged that he was taking a risk and that he might not have gotten published despite the fact that he had already been published. So, I think that it's like E. Cummings, right? Once we know the rules, then we can break them. But if we're trying to break into publishing, especially if we're looking to traditionally publish where the rules are a little stricter, then we certainly want to choose a point of view that is consistent throughout our novel and consistent with the conventions of the genre and move forward with that.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. Once you establish Stephen King with pretty much everything,
Mm-hmm.
but it would seem also, not a that the reason that Stephen King, or who wrote Less, the author, jumping out of mind, we can look it up. Okay. But Pulitzer Prize, okay, fifth novel, whatever. Okay, so he can do this. That his readers, who picks him up or her writing, their brains think like this too. So they're not necessarily a reader that needs to be in this type of structure to move through, that you can jump. And for me, in a way, and I don't know if this is a good analogy, but Toni Morrison, when she writes Beloved and whatever, all over the place, and you really have to go with that, and if you're a limited thinker, single two-dimensional thinker, you're going to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But people who think outside, who can handle all kinds of different stuff coming in, like you mentioned, E. Cummings or Tom Wolfe, whatever, you're okay with that too. So, but that's then audience related. Who's going to be able to appreciate that, right?
Yeah, and I think that some of what you're talking about is the difference and the overlap of story and art, right? So if we have a Venn diagram, there certainly could be some overlap between story and art, but a story, strictly speaking, will have a clear beginning, middle, and end. It's going to move a character through some type of adventure, wanting something, getting it or not, and having some type of resolution. Art can move all over the place. So though the novel Less has a clear beginning, middle, and end, it is also art because it plays with perspective, because it plays with the tropes of the literary canon. There are lots of devices that he uses that makes it art. Now, we can have a book that is strictly art, and there are a lot of them out there. I would argue that a lot of John Irving's work would fit into strictly art. I would argue that a lot of the poems that get published in the New Yorker are strictly art. They have a theme, they've got ideas, there are things happening, but these are not stories with a clear beginning, middle, and end. So those are our two ends of the spectrum. For those people who really want to write literature, they need to live in the overlap of that Venn diagram. Many of us are just mastering being a storyteller, and that's really the first step. How do I tell a cohesive, clear story that has a beginning, middle, and end, and takes my protagonist through an adventure of trying to get something, getting it or not, and having a resolution.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many factors that come into play here that, for consideration, but the problem for the writer would be if you start thinking about all that stuff, it's going to get in the way of the actual writing process.
So don't think about it. just write and create. And I say that, smiling, but I say that putting my neuroscience hat on, looking at fMRIs, looking at how the brain works, looking at the areas that creativity comes from. If you start to bring in that analysis of like, oh my goodness, is this art or is this sort of like, forget about it. Just follow your character and see what he does. And let's worry about all of that other stuff in the revision.
Okay, and I'm going to go back a bit to neuroscience, although this is a little bit different. I want to talk about stream of consciousness. So it's not, what is that? How does that relate to a story itself and how it's produced, and a writer who could go off, and because it often does. So I'll let you speak back, but I'm intrigued by this concept here, and I think you get at it somewhat in storytelling, in answers. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that stream of consciousness writing or free writing can be a really powerful tool for pantsers. Now, it might not all end up in the final product. There was a time when we crossed over the threshold into modern literature at the beginning of the 20th century, where we started to use stream of consciousness as a publishable piece of writing. I think that for the most part, we have moved beyond that, in that we're a little bit more sophisticated in the way that we use stream of consciousness in published writing. But as a tool, I think it can be really powerful. There are a lot of times where I work through a character, I need to know who they are, I just need to see them act. And because I am a writer, writing out what they're doing, what would happen if your character ran into a bear? I don't know why you would need to know that, but you're going to learn a lot about who your character is when they have a stressful situation. How do they act when they're stuck in traffic? I say, having just driven up the mountain through traffic, that's going to tell you a lot about your character's character, and that might be an opportunity for a free write or a stream of consciousness experience to help you with your creativity.
Okay, so then back to, and I'm going to put it in contrast here, although they're absolutely interrelated. The plot, this story arc itself, versus the character development that's within there. So the emphasis is, and I would think, and I'd like to pick on murder mysteries, is that a murder mystery to me is plot primarily. Okay, we get to know the detective a little bit, or the person who's investigating it, and some of their background, but really we want to know who done it at the end. Whereas in other works, like with my work, Sisyphus Wins, for example, it's to me more about character development, the psychology, the personality of the characters, and the relationships of not only the individual, in this case Jonathan, who's a protagonist, but the other characters with it, and that's when it starts to get jumbled in there too. So you get a work, one's this way, one's that way. How do you address it in terms of coaching, and then as an editor?
So I think what you're talking about is the difference between a character-driven plot and a plot-driven plot. So in the first instance with the murder mystery, we have a plot-driven plot, and in the second instance with Sisyphus Wins, we've got a character-driven plot.
Right.
Either way, within the context of the universe that the author has created, there has to be something wanted and denied. So in the case of the murder mystery, someone has been murdered, we assume, and the characters, as well as the reader, want to know who did it, who done it, as you said.
Yeah.
In the character-driven plot, these are also known as coming-of-age novels. So usually we take a character from a situation normal, they go through some sort of transformation and come out different, which may be better or worse, at the end. And that's what that novel is about as a structure. So knowing those two structures, they function differently. At the same time, they need to be paced well to release information in a certain, only so much, so that we want to keep turning pages and we're very interested to know either who this person becomes or doesn't, whether their dreams come to fruition, or to find out, who done it, where the jewel is, if they are going to find the ring, if they're going to get to the end of their quest, whatever it is. There are really only 7 stories out there, and you could argue that there's really only one story out there. The really cool thing is that we've got so many potential ingredients that there are still books to write and stories to tell, and we can still create novelty despite the fact that we've been telling stories for centuries.
Right. So when who wrote Emma?
Jane Austen.
Jane Austen. Okay, and the Bronte sisters. And okay, so they're writing in the early 19th century in England. Now, the moral of the story, the plot and everything, could be the same here. But, to relate to that for many people is difficult. You can take that same story and recreate it, take Wuthering Heights, and only shift the characters, put it in America somewhere, and, the dark place there, and next thing you know, you got the same story, but it's refreshed, and then it becomes relevant, I would think, to a lot of the readers.
Absolutely, and Hollywood has absolutely maximized on that phenomenon, particularly around Jane Austen, who has been turned into many, many, many rom-coms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we just kind of take, so the story hasn't changed since the Greeks and so forth started writing back in, with Euripides and Sophocles, the tragedy is, in so many ways there too. So there's so much to be thinking about. So when you're writing, I didn't think of this initially, but after I got the manuscript all done, and I get my editor and I turn it over to Jan. We get talking. She said, "Okay, who's your audience?" And I said, "Everybody." And she said, "No, not quite." How and when and how much should a writer be concerned or focused on, rightfully so, the audience, for whom she is writing?
It depends on how much work you want in the revision. So if you ask yourself from the beginning, from day one, before you've written anything, who is my story for? Now, some people might not be able to know that because they don't even know enough about their character or plot, and they need to dig in a little bit. But I would say at some point in the initial stages, knowing more or less which genre you're going to fit into, and who the audience of that genre is going to help to inform your writing. And that makes sense if any of us think about, I'm going to do a presentation on how to bake a cake. If my audience is a kindergarten class, I'm going to present that very differently than I'm going to present it to a bunch of stay-at-home moms who probably baked a lot of cakes, and I need to teach them, how to make fancy decorations on it or something. Right. 2 very different presentations. Now, if I had a presentation that was targeted for my stay-at-home moms and a kindergarten teacher invited me into their class, that would be a major disservice to do the same presentation. And so if we think about the revision process for a novel, if I've written a novel for adult women, and now suddenly I've decided that I want to write it as a YA, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of work to do. Whereas if I had figured out that before, I would have much less work to do in my revision.
Okay, and I just remind our listening audience, this is Jerry Fibyanic on KYGT, LPFM 102.7, 103.9, and we're on the Rabbit Hole Writer's Talk here, visiting with Annalisa Parent, who's a writing coach, editor. She does workshops, she does it all, and incredibly knowledgeable in her work, Storytelling for Pantsers, that even if you're not a pantser, you need to read it because it'll teach you also about, your writing process because, even if you're very structured, you still get creative, I would think, eh?
Absolutely. If you're creative, you need structure. If you're structured, you probably need some help with the creativity.
Yeah, bring it all together into, one work there. So tell us about your background then. What got you into looking at it from a neuroscientific, we'll put it that way, perspective, in your skill set, in your approach, in your craft?
So I'm a storyteller from way back. I'm sure I was telling stories as soon as I could and writing them as soon as I could. I was published for the first time at 9. So storytelling and getting those stories out and sharing them has always been really important to me. So I was a journalist, a professional journalist before I'd even graduated from college. So this has been really important to me all along, to be writing and telling stories. I'm also a teacher, and that is, a spiritual calling, if you can call it that. Something that I always knew I wanted to be, and I was a teacher and professor by profession for a long time, simultaneously writing on the side. One of the things that happened when I entered teaching was a really exciting moment in teaching because the discoveries that they had made in neuroscience were just being applied to the study of education. So that was a really interesting intersection to be entering the teaching field, and I had a lot of opportunities to study the brain, to look at how we learn and create the best. As I said, I was in the brain imaging lab at MIT looking at the areas of the brain as we're triggering the brain, what happens, that kind of research. And it's a no-brainer, haha, to think about the way.
All right, so I think you have a chapter on puns, by the way.
I should. That we can apply that same knowledge not only to learners in a formal classroom, but also to how writers write. And amazingly, as soon as we apply that, we've got writers who are in creative flow, which is actually a state in the brain. Hopefully we've all felt it as writers. It's that moment where you just can't stop. You forget to eat. You're so excited. Hours go by and you don't even know it because you're just creating. And that feels really good. Well, we can jumpstart our brains into that process, right? People talk about writer's block, and I understand that they're feeling like it's writer's block. I also see that they don't have to be there. There are ways and mechanisms that we can use to get yourself into more consistent creative flow and to be in a better relationship with your inner critic. Now, you may remember that I talked about in Storytelling for Pantsers that your inner critic is a necessary person to have in your life, but you need to have a healthy relationship with the inner critic. And writer's block stems from an unhealthy relationship with your inner critic, and neuroscience can be that key to get you into creative flow and into a healthy relationship with criticism.
I remember when I had finished the manuscript, everything for Sisyphus Wins, and it's a very personal story. It's a work of fiction, but still. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I really want to go through with this, everything like that. And a friend of ours, Catherine Scott, and I got talking. We were friends, and she said, "Do you ever hear of Stephen Pressfield's work, The War of Art?" And I said, "No." She said, "You need to get it." And so I did. Got it on the Kindle, and I started going. And it's real easy reading, and very short chapters. He goes through. Bottom line is, he calls it resistance. So we call it writer's block. He goes, "No, you're sabotaging yourself," is what it gets down to. Particularly, one, even writing in a non-personal form, that the book is about the other. You're still putting it out there. Your name's on it. Your picture's with it too. So it's risky. Then to create something that gets into more deep person, that increases the risk. And so we tend to hold back, resist is what it is, because we don't want to be vulnerable, is what it gets down to. Do you pick up on that when writers are somewhat holding back?
Absolutely. You know, I would say that 50% or better than of the difficulty in writing is the emotional aspect, whether it's sharing our story or more often it's digging down into those recesses, because you have to be so raw and so real. And it all comes from personal experience, right?
Mhm.
Write what you know isn't about, I should write about petite women who have a dog and live in Colorado. I could write about those things, but what I really should write about are the things that I've experienced, my hurts, my pains, my sorrows, my happinesses, my joys. Those are the things that I know. And those are the areas where people are going to relate to me, because even if they haven't been exactly through X, their why is so close that they understand that feeling of loss. They understand that feeling of grief or guilt or pain or loss. We all have had these experiences, and that's where real writing comes from. Now that's hard. That's some really difficult mining. And again, that's something that I write about in Storytelling for Pantsers, because it's such an important part of the process. So the programs that I run to help writers to finish, publish, and sell their books address specifically all of the emotional elements that writers go through. So we have a personal trainer who meets with our writers every week, not only to set word count goals or revision goals or, you know, press release count goals. Those are all important concrete elements of writerly success.
Mhm.
But also to talk about, I'm afraid of failing, I'm afraid of succeeding, I'm afraid of telling my story. I'm afraid because when I wrote that chapter, it reminded me of someone I haven't thought of in 20 years, and I cried for the rest of the day. That's hard stuff. And if we're gonna do this thing right, we need to be honest about that.
Yeah, and gets into the rawness of it. So I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Okay, you like this. Okay, we'll see.
Truth or dare.
Have you written fiction?
Absolutely.
Okay, haven't published?
I have an agent, and we're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a work in progress right now.
Yeah.
So you're not exactly on the spot then, because my question really comes into, now that you know all this stuff here, you're a great coach, an editor, etc., and now you're into that creative element there. Is it an asset? Is it sometimes a hindrance? Do you have to sometimes check it at the door before you sit down at the computer? How does that all interplay now, given what you know? Because you're far more knowledgeable than most of us here. And then for us, as, you know, rookie kind of authors and beginners, and so how do we do that?
Well, you know, it's actually a really wonderful thing, Jerry, because it means that I can help authors every single day to do the thing that they want to do and share their story. But it also means that I get to sit on the bench next to them, right? Because I'm just as human as they are. I get just as scared about fear and about success, about failure, about sharing it, about, you know, is anybody going to like this? Is anybody going to read it? All of those things that we do as writers happen to me too. And, you know, the people in my programs will be nodding if they're listening, because I share that with them. So as you may know, I won a major award two weekends ago for Storytelling for Pantsers. And that was really, really moving. And it wasn't just moving because it's amazing to be honored and to win an award. It was moving because, you know, I was on a deadline for this book, and I finished it in a month, which is insane. Please do not write a book in a month.
My editor doesn't want to hear that, by the way.
No, well, you know, I was taken on by the publishing house, and they reached out for me to write Storytelling for Pantsers. They then hired me as senior editor, which was great. So, but it just made me realize, and this is just me being emotionally raw to all of the listeners, you know, if an award-winning book can be written in a month, what can I do with 6 months? Holy moly, there's power in that. And so it re-energized this revision that, you know, I told my agent in the spring, after we'd heard back from the publishing house on several rounds of revision, I just needed a break. And I said, I'll get back to you in
Yeah.
September. And I didn't know if I would ever pick up that novel again, honestly, because it, you know, I went through the ringer with them. And so, you know, it was tough. And that's just sort of the reality of the situation. But after winning that award, I said, you know what? I know what makes a good story. This is silly. Like, just make the revisions. Just do the thing. Like, don't drop it. It's a good story. Clearly, you know, the agent was interested in it. The publishing house is interested in it. Now I've got a new direction. And I was re-energized and re-motivated to do that. That's just the reality of the situation. So, you know, to answer your question, yes, I know a lot. And probably I can draw from my own resources in a way that some writers can't. At the end of the day, I'm still sitting on the bench as a writer who struggles with all of the things that writers struggle with.
You're walking the walk, not just talking.
That's right.
Yeah, it's an amazing process. And speaking of stream of consciousness, I had a follow-up thought on that. In terms of that, all obeisance to Stephen Pressfield and reckoning with these, writer's block is essentially a resistance. But I've also discovered there are times when you need to walk away from it, that it's not writer's block, that there's something that is not coming right, and it's still, in my mind, it's still back in the unconscious there. And yes, there's a blockage there, but it's not me not wanting to go there. It's just something else that's interfering with you. You had mentioned, like, you have to take time out there. And I found that out because I was working on this manuscript, and there's so much happening. I got into the spring, and it was just like, I can't go. So I took a long road trip, turned off the radio. I was gone 17 days, 4,000 miles. So I had a lot of time just to think. And then as everything started clearing out of the head that was plugging it up, it started to give me direction, and I couldn't wait to come back and fire the laptop up and get her the main through, any rate, and start writing again.
That is such a valid and interesting point, and so many authors overlook that. So just this morning, one of the important elements of our programs is celebrating your victories, and there's a neuroscientific reason that we do that, but it's also part of getting over the fear, right? Because if we admit the things that we're doing, then we start to have a better relationship with fear. So one of the writers this morning said, I don't have anything to celebrate. It was a bad writing week for me, and I just needed to step away and take some time with my family. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's an amazing thing to celebrate, because you recognized what you needed and who you were and where your brain was. And let's face it, like, our brains are not endless machines. They need a break. And there's power in the subconscious. There's power in what happens while we're sleeping. Dreams are a perfect example of that. So taking that time away, and the writer will forgive me posthumously for not remembering who said this, but one famous author said, you know, storytelling happens on walks. That is a gross misparaphrase. But there's power in that. And so a lot of the writing that I do actually happens while I'm on a walk, because I can go for a walk with my characters and they start to tell me what the connections are that felt really frustrating. Now, I don't want to go for a walk with them because I'm feeling frustrated. I have no idea how Sally ends up with Bob. I have no idea. And so it's frustrating. But then I go for a walk with Sally and Bob, and suddenly they tell me why they chose each other or whatever, right? That starts to happen. And that space is it's not a miracle, it's neuroscience.
It is. And I love your example there about going for a walk with your character. So people say, you know, if you're in water, you know, shower, that sort of thing. Mine is, I'm sipping on 12-year-old scotch. And I sit down and I go, okay, so Daniel, what's going on here? You know, literally. And just move my head into it, you know, and I'll have some soft music on in the background or whatever, and maybe just some candles on. But I really just want to get into Daniel's head, because I want him to tell the story. I am just the medium that brings it to consciousness. The Daniel story is already out there in the unconscious. That's my thinking there. Not everybody's like that, but it is about finding that methodology that for you, and to recognize, like your friend said, I had a bad week and everything, and I need to step away. You said, No. That's an amazing, recognition of self there too. And that is huge in there. And maybe you want to write about that too, by the way.
Exactly. And what I love about what you're saying, Jerry, is, for me, it can be a walk. It could be a bubble bath. There are lots of ways that this can
Yes.
happen. For you, it's sitting down with the music and the candles. Neither of those is the right way. And lots of writers get stuck in like the right way. And I'm making air quotes for those of you who aren't like Jerry is. There is no right way. There's the right way for you. And the right way for you today may not be the right way for you tomorrow. And that's okay. Anybody who's telling you that there's a right way to write is wrong. There are better ways to write. There are more efficient ways to write, but there is no one way that is the right way to write.
Absolutely. Okay, we just have a few more minutes, and I wanted you to talk about a date with the views. Okay, your stuff there and how people get a hold. And you've moved now to Colorado.
Yes, I'm
You're
here
here
in
full time.
Colorado.
Yay! Welcome. Sorry, Easterners. We got her. And joyfully so. So talk about that.
Sure. So over at Date with the Muse, we run the writing gym because, and I like the gym as an analogy for the writing process because, in order to maintain your muscles, you have to keep working them. And in order to maintain your writing, you have to be in constant relationship with it. You have to show up. You have to do the work. You have to learn the things. You have to have the coaches and the personal trainers. So I chose the writing gym on purpose. And the writing gym is 3 programs. We have the VIP program, which helps you to write a novel in 8 weeks, and it works. Once you've got that draft, you can graduate into the publishing mastermind where you revise your novel, and you're going to put together all of the materials that you need for traditionally publishing that novel, and then you can graduate into Novel Selling You, which helps you to sell your novel. So most publishing houses for first-time authors are going to offer some marketing support, but we want to augment that to make you a high seller so that for your second book, they're going to be putting more marketing dollars behind you because they've seen success. Right. So we're helping you put together your author platform so that you can have those opportunities and create a writing lifestyle. That's really what we're about. We're about working with authors who want to write over and over again. They've got many books and many stories that they want to share with the world. So that's what we do in the writing gym. And Jerry, I think I told you we've got a writer's retreat coming up in England in May of 2019. We just opened enrollment on September 1st. There are only 6 slots. It's an exclusive access to a manor house on the coast of England in Devon. It's a UNESCO World Site because the air is so clear. You can see all the stars. We eat only locally sourced, chef-prepared, 5-star food in your own room. It's absolutely beautiful, and access to me as your writing coach to help you to get into that creative zone. So 6 slots, 5 days in England, and if you'd like to know about that, you can go to www.datewiththemuse.com/England.
Wow, yeah, and it's just that, and I have learned, myself just getting into it because I'm a late lifer of the Grandma Moses of writing. I don't think I'll produce right. But at any rate, but I'm just so intrigued, not only by the writing, it just motivates me to do more when I learn more about the whole thing and the community that's out there. And I didn't know you a year ago, and we just I think online one thing and another, and I said, I like here, and here we are now, and it's just such a fulfilling experience.
Absolutely. Yes, being part of an active writing community, being with others, and knowing that others are struggling with the same things you are and celebrating the same things you are. It's a powerful, powerful experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank you for coming on, and again, your website is?
www.datewiththemuse.com.
And the retreat is again?
www.datewiththemuse.com/England.
Ooh, in Jelly und England.
Oh, England.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, there's some tea with the Queen. With a little Italian flavor.
Yeah.
Hey,
with some hot sauce.
All right, everyone. Hey, this This is Jerry Fibyanic, KYGT, LPFM, 102.7, 103.9, and been visiting here with Annalisa Parent, writer's coach, editor, everything here, storyteller for pantsers. And so appreciate Annalisa coming up here, and I'll be back in a few with another author. But in the meantime, let's do some music, and yeah, here we go.
Thanks for watching, guys.